Where do they come from? I mean, what are they about?
Keep the jail population down?
Well, it gets to that, but that's not what motivated them first. What motivated them first was they've got a very liberal social philosophy. Let me tell you what they say. Y'all need to hear this. They come from this place. You know, the only reason that person is in jail in the first place is because we as society have failed him. If we had been to that person all we should have been, he never would have gotten arrested anyway. It's our fault he's in jail. We're responsible for him being in jail. So how fair is it to him that now we're going to say to him, we put you there by letting you down. So how fair is it for us to make you pay to get yourself out? We who put him there need to pay to get him out. That's one place they come from. The other place they come from is a deeply embedded position of career competition. Let me put it another way. They want your job. You say, now, Jerry, how can you just get up there and say they want our job? Well, there's an organization called the National Association of Pretrial Service Agencies. Its membership is made up of the executives from all of these hundreds of pretrial service offices. And every year they have a big convention. And one year they had that convention in Chicago at the Hyatt Hotel there off Lakeshore Drive. And I went up there. And I just quietly went in and paid the registration fee and signed up, and I was in. And I went to their meetings, and I went to their classes, and I learned about their operational policy. And they have an operational policy made up of what they call 10 standards. Standard number 4, I'm quoting it, says, there should be no compensated surety. Now, I go to their closing banquet, and a guy named Feeney, who is a professor from some law school in Florida and who was on their board, was up giving the banquet keynote address. And when it was over, he opened the floor up for questions. And I made up a question. Now, I'd been all week. I hadn't said nothing. I was trying to travel under the radar because they wouldn't have wanted me in there. And but now it's the end of the deal, and we're going to all go home in a few minutes. And he opened up the floor for questions, and I made up a question. I raised my hand. And I said, Professor, down where I'm from, and there were hundreds of people in this room. I said, down where I'm from, the pretrial release office and the bail bondsman kind of work together. What's your feeling about that? And he said, and I quote again, we must be free of these vampire bail bondsmen. So make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, if a pretrial service office gets close to you, they want your job. Now, let's get to your point. What accounts for this resurgence in them? I will tell you that 20 years ago we formed an organization called the National Association of Bail Insurance Companies, and it's because they were getting real active at that time. And its purpose was to try and beat them back. I was general legal counsel to that organization, and it was kind of my job to go fight pretrial release and try to drive that dragon back into its cave. So the Federal Bureau of Justice Statistics every 2 years was putting out a bulletin, and it was basically put out for state court judges and state court judicial officers. to let them know about statistics around the country to help them in making their pretrial release decisions. You follow me? And guess what that thing showed? It took all 5 methods of release, where somebody puts up property, where it's a surety bond like we provide, conditional release where they turn the guy loose in care of his minister or something like that. It was own recognizance release where they just let him out on his own promise that he would come back. And it was deposit release, and in that own recognizance release category are the pretrial service agencies. You see how that works. And then there was the 10% deposit bail, because some states have had that for a long time now. And it took those 5 methods. What it did is every year it took 75,000 state case felons from the 55 biggest counties in the country, and it tracked them for a year. And it wanted to know 2 things about them: which ones of them failed to make a scheduled court appearance, and which ones of them committed another felony during that year. And it got all that information together, and then it said, now, let's break that information down and compare method of release to method of release to method of release. You see what I'm saying? In other words, for those that got out on a property bond, for those that got out on a surety bond, for those that got out on their own recognizance through a pretrial service agency, for those that got out on an all-cash bond, that was another category, for those that got out on a deposit bond, how did these methods compare to each other in terms of performance? Performance of what? Getting people back to court and holding down new crimes being committed. How did they compare to one another? You may be interested to know that every 2 years when that bulletin came out showing the results of these studies, we won. Every single time. We outshone every other method of release. We significantly outperformed every other method of release in getting people back to court and holding down the crime rate. Well, surely we didn't do better than cash bonds. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And every 2 years that study comes out, and every 2 years numbers are about the same. So I found out about that thing. So I went up to the United States Government Printing Office in Washington, D.C., and I got 10,000 of those things. And then we wrote letters. We wrote a letter to in every county in the country that had a pretrial release office, we wrote a letter to the president of the Rotary Club, tailored to him, and we sent him that study. And we wrote a letter to the chief administrative criminal court judge, tailored just to him, and we sent him or her that study. We wrote a letter to the county commissioners. What do y'all have in South Carolina? Do you have county commissioners or county council? County councils, okay. We would have written it to, if there was a pretrial service office in Lexington, we would have sent that letter to each one of those county council members in Lexington and sent that study. And we did that religiously. Every time that study came out, we bombarded all kind of people with those studies and said, look, look, look. Here was our message. The more you grow the number of people who get out on a bail bond, and the more you reduce the number of people who get out any other way, the fewer crime victims you're going to have, and the greater the financial savings to the county. And boy, we whipped them. There were places that shut them down. And we made the mistake of sort of resting on our laurels. We went on to fight other battles in that organization, and now within the last certainly a year, maybe 9 months, they have come back with a vengeance. Now, how are they coming back so effectively? I mean, and up to right now, folks, up until maybe 3 months ago, they've been beating us. They're getting bigger. They're expanding. They're opening up more offices. They're growing the ones that they have already. Now, how are they doing this? Well, during this current administration, national administration, you've got the liberal media jumping all over stuff like this. For example, 3 weeks ago, National Public Radio